Welcome to another OU Insider Under the Visor Sooners podcast. My name is Brandon Drum. I'm here with Parker Thune. And let's just get the ads. We got a lot to talk about. Junior Day, galore, OU basketball. And then that was a choking sign for those that don't know, because they have choked the last two big games, home games, mind you, away, that they needed to win in typical fashion. And there's transfer portal talk. And I think we'd be remiss if we didn't want to talk about some defensive line rankings that came out today. So we'll dive into all of that right here on the OU Insider Under the Visor Sooners podcast. But first, Parker Thune, you need to get us an ad read out of the way, and then we will go steer clear from that the rest of the way. Go.
Yes, Brandon. Okay, so this episode of the OU Insider Under the Visor podcast is brought to you, folks, by Manscaped. Roses are red, violets are blue. Trim your balls, and your date will thank us too. What's up, fellas? Valentine's Day is knocking, and Manscaped is the remedy for what the love doctor ordered with the all-new Performance Package 5.0 Ultra, which includes the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra, the Weed Whacker 2.0 nose and ear hair trimmer, Manscaped's liquid formulations, and two free goodies, the Shed travel bag and the Boxers 2.0, because comfort is king. And for the bearded kings, Manscaped also brings you the Beard Hedger Pro Kit, designed to shape your scruff effortlessly. It sculpts cheek lines and maintains beard styles, giving you that suave look for your romantic moments. So get 20% off and free shipping with the code OU Insider at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com when you use code OU Insider, because your grooming upgrade, awaits, ready to charm your Valentine's dates. That's all, folks. On to ball.
All right. And now I'm back. After the roses are red, violets are blue. Something ball hair too. You're professional, dude. You're better than me. All right. Big Junior Day this weekend. Huge Junior Day. All right. OUinsider.com VIP has so much info for you. Like, I think, Parker, you've had 2 or 3 updates. I've had 2 or 3 updates. And there's multiple updates in every one of those postings. So there's what, a good maybe 20, 25 targets we've already made notes of already. Something ridiculous. And you can only find that on OUinsider.com VIP. But OU hit it out of the park. Absolutely hit it out of the park. And yeah, look, I think 2 things negatively that could be taken away from this weekend on the recruiting side and transfer portal side is the fact that, one, Landon Hatchett decided to stay at Washington. But I want people to also understand that is not over. I mean, that we made that pretty clear on OU Insider. I don't think that. I think when we say not over, I think there's a world where, that family may be open still to moving around, I guess. I don't know. That's just, those are rumors out there right now. I don't know if they're true or not, but those are the rumors out there right now. That there's a lot going on there that have, how would you want to word that, Parker? Things kind of got in the way of the transfer. Would that be the best way? Like, had nothing to do with NIL, and it was not NIL. I think that's the most clerical thing that we can say there is, it is not NIL. Like, it has zero to do with NIL. It has to do with things that transfers have to deal with sometimes.
And
that's just it.
Got to understand that Garen and Landon are in 2 entirely different academic situations.
Yep.
2 entirely different situations in general, right? They're 3 years apart. Garen is on the verge of graduating. Landon is in his first year of college. They're at very different junctures in their collegiate lives, not just their football careers, but their collegiate lives. And so, look, it's it's been all over the place with both of those dudes. But as we've reported over on OU Insider, well, and I guess it became public late last night that Landon has officially withdrawn from the transfer portal and is going to stay at Washington. What's true for Landon may not be true for Garen. And again, as we've said from the get-go, Brandon, these two are not your conventional package deal, right? It's not like the McCulloughs last year where you get one, you're getting the other. No, Oklahoma certainly would like to have both. They would like to get both. But if they were a package deal, they would have visited on the same weekend, right? Like they would have done everything in conjunction, in concert. They didn't. And Oklahoma still sits in a very good spot with Garen, despite the fact that Landon is going to stick it out at Washington. And I know, like, look, nothing is off the table, especially when you're this late in the process with a guy who is on the verge of finalizing a transfer. But OU still kind of has the expectation that they're going to get Geirean Hatchett.
Yeah. And I think it's Geirean. I want to say that's what I was told last night. It was
Geirean?
Geirean Hatchett. Yeah.
Interesting.
Ooh,
Not what I would have guessed, but
no, and and maybe they were mispronouncing it, but that's how this person pronounced the name multiple times, and I figured they would know. So I was like, well, okay, that's what I'm gonna. I'm just gonna think I'm gonna stick with Gary until he tells us otherwise. But look, Gary told us right from the start, and we reported on OU Insider that they weren't a package deal. That wasn't the end all. Like he came out and basically said, when I hit him up the second he got in the portal, and he said, look, his brother was already in there. And I said, so what's the deal? Are you guys going to go to the same place? He's like, it's not the end of the world if we don't. Like, that is not, we love to continue to play together, but that is not like the end all as far as decision making goes, because they are like, Garen's got two years left. Obviously, Landon has 3 years left. So one's been in school for 4 years. The other one's been in school for 1. So there's 2 separate worlds, as you said earlier, that they're living in. And as far as credits, as far as the ability to move to and fro, because one thing I will say, when you deal with the Pac-12 schools or previous Pac, so the West Coast schools in general run on quarter systems. And those quarter systems make it very, very hard to move to and from other schools, because you don't get full, like where at Oklahoma, they start in August, right? And generally most of the South, they start schools in August. And I want people to start to understand this, because this is the world of the transfer portal in free agency in college compared to the NFL. All these schools run on different timelines. Like, they don't start school on the West Coast till the middle of September. It's a completely different timeline. So now you're working with semesters potentially not being over, even after you take this long Christmas break, you come back and your semester may not be done. Right? So there's things that can be a bump in the road as far as movement goes from one place to the next right now. With certain kids that are transferring, whether they're freshmen, sophomores, from the West Coast, East Coast, all that, all these things, because different conferences require different math classes. That's the big one in the SEC you guys are going to learn about, is the math class. There's a math class that sometimes JUCO kids or sometimes these other kids and these other universities have not gotten to take yet. Well, in the SEC, that's a required course. And so and it worked for perfect. I'm trying to think of the linebacker, number 10. Oh my gosh, back in 2003 to 2005. Lance Mitchell, was going to go to Florida, but the math class got in the way. And so he ended up at Oklahoma. It was an SEC math class issue as far as his transfer went. And those are the things you run into. And they're little bitty things. It's not always NIL is the whole point. It's not always NIL. So there's things that are going on with this transfer that there was bumps on the road, and he returned to Washington. We'll see. Obviously, they have 3 months for him to stick it out there. If his brother Geirean does, in fact, transfer to Oklahoma, if that does happen, and that is the expectation still, we haven't heard otherwise yet. And if we do hear otherwise, we'll update it on OU Insider VIP. That if Garen does transfer to Washington, it's going to be really hard for people not to sit there and assume that Landon will eventually end up in Norman. Like, that's just going to be, that's human nature, right, Parker? Like, oh, they're going to eventually end up together. Because that's a long distance split for the families, right?
It is, no doubt about it. And, Garen, the opportunity to play with Garen was not insignificant in Landon's initial decision to commit to Washington. Correct. Obviously, it wasn't the only reason, but it's a factor. It's obviously a factor. Those two are close. And so we'll see what happens. Again, though, at this point, Oklahoma's pursuit of those two, it's not necessarily going to be a scenario moving forward where they're joined at the hip in terms of OU's pursuit of those dudes, right? They're going to focus on closing on Garen right now, and then whatever happens down the line with Landon happens. But obviously the window on him transferring to Oklahoma, at least this spring, has been foreclosed. So Geirean Hatchett, you would presume, will be the last portal addition, or I should say the last potential portal addition for Oklahoma until that post-spring window opens up. Yep.
And then the other negative thing, we're starting negative because there's a lot of positives from this Junior Day weekend. The other negative was Isaiah Campbell, 2025 defensive tackle, committing to Clemson over the last few hours before we got into this recording of the podcast. So, when I say negative, it's negative in the fact that OU was the other school that he was looking at very thoroughly at this juncture. He hadn't been able to get out and visit. He had talked about coming out and visiting and wanting to get out and visiting. The big deal is that the irony in this, Parker, is that the Clemson staff, that their coaching staff at that school at Durham Southern High School, was very close to this staff that's in Norman, like really, really, really close. But Dabo and his staff continued that relationship, harvested that relationship that was already there with that Clemson logo, and it worked in their benefit. And then when you add the location, obviously being a few hours away, 3-4 hours away, that also plays, or 2 or 3 hours away, that also plays in to that equation. So it was a big win for Clemson. And we've said this from the get-go. Oklahoma's they got A and B options in 25 because it's not very deep. And then we're going to focus on the portal as far as defensive tackle goes.
Yeah.
So, and defensive line goes.
I'll be honest, I don't really regard that as a loss or a negative for Oklahoma, just because, and obviously, yeah, there was interest there, but when a kid that highly regarded from that far away hasn't even visited campus yet, it's hard to take OU or anybody very seriously as a contender, at least until they get on campus. And so
that's fair, but
with Isaiah Campbell going to Clemson, it kind of removes that potential variable from the equation. And
it's an A equation. My point is it's an A guy.
Sure.
That is now off the board, and now you've got to go to B and or the portal in this class because the 25 class isn't deep. That's my point. But that's the negative part of it.
You get to focus now on guys that you actually legitimately, objectively have a really good shot at.
And let's talk about that.
Okay.
Let's talk about Cole Breiler. Let's talk about him from New Jersey, Hun Academy in Princeton University, by Princeton University in Princeton, New Jersey. What's your take on him? I'll do Landon Rink because now
Yeah.
I'm sort of starting to buy in a little bit there. Even a text that I got from him this morning, I was like, "What?" So go ahead.
Yeah, no, I've, obviously gotten the chance to touch base with Cole Breiler quite a bit ever since his recruitment really started to take off. OU was one of his first big time offers, and he first got the chance to visit back in November for a game day. So he was familiar with campus before, obviously quite familiar with the staff. Brent Venables and Todd Bates were out visiting him less than 2 weeks ago up at the Hun School in New Jersey. And going into this visit, I felt that Oklahoma had the lead for Cole Breiler. Nothing that happened on that visit would change my mind in that regard. I still think they have the lead for Cole Breiler. The big question is going to be what the timeline is, because as we've talked about so often, Brandon, the Sooners have 9 commits in the class. They're only taking 20 to 22. And so spots are at a premium going forward. And the guys that are willing to jump on board early, there's even more incentive to do so given the situation right now in the 2025 class, because you have no idea when that spot is going to be gone. For instance, like look no further than wide receiver, right? There's one wide receiver spot left. And so if a guy like Manny Choice, who had a really, really good visit to Oklahoma over the weekend, if he wants to jump on board, well, he's probably only got a window of a few weeks to a few months to do so before somebody else says, yeah, I want in on what Emmett Jones is building. And then poof, that spot's gone. And so on the defensive line, where you already have Kamari Moore committed and you already have Alex Shield Knight committed as a defensive end, again, timeline is going to matter. And that's why, although Oklahoma is in a great spot with Cole Breiler or Breer, I have to keep reminding myself, Breer. They're in a really good spot with Cole Breer. They're in a really good spot with Landon Rink, as you'll touch on more here in just a second. But the reason why you haven't seen any predictions for either one of them in favor of Oklahoma is not because the Sooners aren't in really good position relative to the other schools. It's that, well, what can you count on those guys making a decision early enough to have a spot at Oklahoma, no question about it, to where the numbers don't even come into play? And I don't know. Breer has told me that he wants to take 3 or 4 official visits before he hones in on a decision. So that's kind of my holdup, if you will, in going ahead with the future cast for Breer to Oklahoma. But I do really like where the Sooners sit, and obviously having the familiarity up there is going to help. With Logan Howland, his former teammate, now on the roster at Oklahoma, he has set his official visit to OU for late June. He and his teammate Kamar Archie, a 4-star linebacker from the very same school, the Hun School, are going to take their OVs on the same weekend to OU, which is something that we've reported on over at OU Insider. So if you want the full details on that situation, not just with Breer, but with Archie, again, really good opportunity for you to head over to OU Insider and grab a subscription for just a few bucks a month. But with that, Brandon, on the Landon Rink situation, what do you got?
Yeah, look, he's a Texas legacy. I'm gonna put that out there in the forefront, and I'm not
always
there
the
yet.
disclaimer.
Yeah, always a disclaimer, and I'm not there yet as far as me feeling like this isn't going to be another Colton Vasek type of situation. That said, OU is the only school he has an official visit set up with. Interestingly enough, it's also in late June, June 21st to 23rd. And he texted me this morning and I said, so have you talked to Texas at all about, he said, no, they haven't even brought it up to me just yet. So I think that's interesting because right now all these schools are, you know, they're starting to schedule their official visits out, 5-6 months in advance, because they know that once these kids get on these other campuses, that's what's going to be brought to their attention. And so I'm not going to sit here and say that after his next visit to after his next visit to, sorry, I got a source calling me real quick. After this next visit to Texas, that they won't have that. But I think there's also a world where Texas, after the year that they just had, after the fact that he's a Texas legacy, that maybe there's a little bit of some overconfidence in their chances there with Landon Rink. Maybe they don't push them very hard. I mean,
but
all
again,
these people.
How is that at all dissimilar from the Colton Vasek situation? Like that I think is going to be the holdup.
Here's the difference between the two. And I made note of this on OU Insider. Colton Vasek barely showed up to OU. Like, it was a big deal when he made it to that party in the Palace because he hadn't been there since in like 3 or 4 months. And he'd been to Texas several times, obviously, because he lives down the road from Texas. Landon Rink's been to Oklahoma like 6 or 7 times. He's went to
there a lot.
He's been to a lot of games this past season. That is where it gets way different. Is, to me, actions always speak louder than words. And we said that in the Colton Vasek situation as it was playing out. We're like, look, he's saying he's committed, but his actions are saying otherwise. And we kept rehashing that over and over and over and over and over. Even though he was saying to us, I'm fully committed, we would always have a disclaimer, but he keeps going to Texas. He keeps coming to Oklahoma. And that's where it gets kind of weird for me here, because we have the, follow the visits mantra on OU Insider, and he keeps coming to Norman. And so it may be there are kids out there that want to kind of pave their own path, whether they go to the arch rival or not. It's not that big a deal in their family, and I'm not saying it's not Landon Rink's, but you can tell by the amount of times that they've been to Norman and the several times that they've been to Texas A&M that the University of Texas isn't the only place that he has his eyes on. And so that's where it gets different. Again, I'm not there yet. I do know people in Norman feel really good about their chances. That's the weird part about it too. Like, you have this confidence. Remember, they had that confidence with Colton Vasek, and we were all looking around going, how? The dude's only been there like twice. Well, he's been there 5, 6, 7 times. Landon Rink has 5, 6, 7 times. So that's where it gets really, really hard for me to wrap my head around this and keep kind of making this parallel to Colton Vasek. But I'm going to continue to do so because fool me once, right? And Colton Vasek committed to OU and was committed to OU for like 5 months or 4 months. So again, it's really weird. I don't know. Oklahoma keeps swinging away at the Texas legacies on the D line. At some point, they're probably going to win one. I just don't know that it's going to be Landon Rink, though. Sources in Norman feel like they got more than a puncher's chance. I'll say that. So, that's the other. As far as another D lineman that they're in a good shape for is Max Granville, who continues to show up to Norman. He's another guy that he was at 2 or 3 games this past season, and now he's at the first big junior day. It seems like Miguel Chavis and the Sooners have once again positioned themselves really well. And I believe Rink's from the Houston area. Granville's from the Houston area. And Jonah Williams is from the Houston area. They actually took a photo together.
Oh, look at that. We are almost half an hour into this podcast, and that's our first mention of Jonah Williams, who was obviously the headliner this past weekend.
He was, and that's kind of where I'm transitioning to, a little segue that's well done by myself. Pat my back.
Props.
Yeah, thank you. So Jonah Williams, 5-star safety, once again from the Houston area, Galveston, Houston area, whatever you want to call it, made it to Oklahoma again. This is the 5th visit in the last year. And that's a long trip. That's 6 hours, 6.5, 7 hours, I believe.
That's at least 7 hours, Brandon.
Yeah, at least
that is
7
a
hours.
long way.
I've only been to Galveston twice, so I don't really remember how long it took me to get there. I believe we stayed in Houston, so it was a 6.5 hour drive, and I drove another hour south. So probably 7.5 hour away. And I got to tell you, Oklahoma was a leader going in, and they sure came out the big leader afterwards. And I think that's about where you got to stop. I think Oklahoma has positioned themselves to be very difficult to beat moving forward, Parker. At least it feels that way.
It does feel that way. And boy, you want to talk about a defensive cornerstone. The Sooners had, well, I would say the Sooners' defensive cornerstone in 2023 for the majority of that cycle was PJ Adebawara, because Peyton Bowen obviously didn't end up in the Sooners class until literally the very last day. So you had a guy throughout the majority of that class that was your meal ticket, if you will, in PJ. You certainly had that guy in David Stone in the 2024 cycle. He committed in August. If the Sooners could continue this trend, Brandon, and they could sustain their momentum in Jonah Williams recruitment to the point where they could get him locked down by summer or even earlier, right? Because I think the way that, or as strongly as this is trending in OU's favor, I think that's a possibility that's on the table, that this could be wrapped up much sooner than anybody expects right now. But if that is the case, man, that's Oklahoma up exceptionally well the rest of the way, because we know, and we've discussed the fact that OU is going to need to be very selective with the guys that they take commitments from here on out, because you want to make sure this is a talent dense class because of how small it's going to be. And the 9 guys that Oklahoma has in the boat right now, I think they're all studs. Some of them might be 3 stars for the time being, but make no mistake, they're all going to get blue chip consideration if they're not already, right? Kamari Moore is the perfect example of a dude that is a 3-star right now, but he won't be come National Signing Day. At least I don't think he should be. But if you get a top 10 player in the nation in Jonah Williams committed, and committed relatively early, what kind of an impact is that going to have on some of your elite targets across the rest of the board, especially on the defensive side of the ball? And you brought up the Houston connection with Landon Rink and Max Granville. Man, those are 2 unquestioned consensus blue chip dudes. That is a nucleus defensively. And the Sooners already have some semblance of a nucleus. It is a localized nucleus in Alex Shield Knight and Marcus James, and obviously Kamari Moore, Trinae Washington. I think he ends up playing defense. That's just my opinion. But if you can expand that, and you can have a 5-star dude at a position where 5-star dudes typically just don't exist, at least not in great frequency or in great numbers, then, man, that sets you up so well. That sets you up so well moving forward. You have the SEC sticker to recruit to. You have a 10-win season that you're coming off. And now you have arguably the best overall defender in the entire nation. Arguably the best overall athlete in the entire nation on the board in the class of 2025 before midsummer arrives. You can't script it much better than that. And as we've talked about before, Brandon, I think the other thing that makes you very confident in Oklahoma's ability to, as I said, sustain that momentum in the Jonah Williams recruitment is the fact that Brandon Hall's running point. And Brandon Hall, in the course of his 2 years on staff at Oklahoma, has quite literally gotten pretty much anybody he's wanted. The guys he's prioritized, he's landed them.
Yeah, look, that guy might be the most sincere human being I've ever met, to be honest with you. So, and it plays in recruiting. People see fakeness and they see sincerity, right? And what you get with Brandon Hall is sincerity. You get a good human being. And I think the one thing I thought Mario Robinson said to me was he cares. Like he genuinely cares about you on and off the field. And that resonates with not just the player, but the parents. Like they see the sincerity, they see the trust, they see the genuine love that he has for his players. And you see that in the interviews that he has too. Like when he talks about his players, when he talks about the program, there's a genuine love and sincerity that everybody kind of likes him because of it. And the fan base has grown to really like Brandon Hall. And when the defensive coordinator position opened, that was the first name everybody threw out was like Brandon Hall. You got to go get Brandon Hall. And it wasn't just because of his recruiting prowess, it's because he's called a great defensive game plan at Troy multiple times in his career, built a really solid defensive foundation from just scratch and crap when he was down there and he showed up and that place was a hellhole. So he's done it. He knows how to build it. He knows what he's looking for and he knows Brent Venables' system. And that's why you get all those things together and he made the perfect fit. But they chose to go in the direction of Zach Alley, which I thought was an amazing hire as well. And that safety room, man, if they can pull off Jonah Williams and let's say Amarian Robinson and I'll let you say his name, Matai
Tagovailoa.
I didn't want to screw that one up. So if they can pull off two of those three and you add that to Peyton Bowen, to RSJ, to Jaden Robinson, Eric McCarty, Michael Boganowski. Are you kidding me? That might be the most talented safety room in college football.
I think it will be the most talented safety room in college football. Give it a year or two.
I agree.
Right now, I don't know. Next year,
it's up there with Peyton Bowen and
especially
and Billy Bowman. It's up there.
Well, yes, it's up there. It's up there, no question about it.
Those guys are studs, top 100 players.
Let's say you get Peyton Bowen back for his senior year in 2026 with the guys that are just going to be coming into their own at that point. Guys like McCarty and Boganowski, and we'll see what happens with the development of Reggie Powers, man. Another guy.
Everybody's talking up him right now, by the way.
Yeah, that safety room has the potential to be scary in 2025, 26, because right now you've got good athletes. Don't get me wrong, Brandon. And there is absolutely no minimizing what Billy Bowman means to this football team and how good Peyton Bowen is. But I think it just adds another dimension to it all when you have outstanding athletes that are also big physical human beings. And Billy Bowman and Peyton Bowen play physical. They play bigger than their frames, but they're only 5'10" and 5'11" respectively. I mean, you start throwing 6'2" dudes who can carry 215, 220 pounds and maintain all of their athleticism in doing so back there. Guys like Robert Spears-Jennings and Boganowski and Reggie Powers and the like. Those are SEC safeties, Brandon. Physically, those are SEC safeties. And again, not to say that Billy Bowman and Peyton Bowen aren't. Objectively, they are. But those guys aren't going to be around forever. You get one more year of Billy Bowman. And it's just encouraging to me that heading into the SEC, even post-Bowman, you have a whole core of dudes that is capable of striking fear into the best conference in America, because not only are they exceptional athletes, but they're also huge.
No, I agree. Another good player that I think Oklahoma is in good standing with that was back in Norman once again is Mesquite Horn's 4-star offensive lineman, Lamont Rogers. I spoke to him for a bit. I believe
Well,
he's going to.
he's just going to go get bagged by some other huge school.
Well, I was about to say he's going to A&M next weekend.
Yeah.
So, I mean, way to go, Parker.
Wow. I meant that in sarcasm, and then prophecy was immediately fulfilled.
Anywho, yeah, look, I was told by multiple people, including Lamont himself, that his dad was like, what are we waiting on? Like, go ahead and get it over with. And so obviously cooler heads prevailed, and they did not. They've got other visits they wanted to, and it's smart. Like, he has a really, Coach McDonald, the recruiting coordinator at Mesquite Horn, is one of the best to do it, period, by far. And you got one of the best head coaches, obviously, that helps run the Rivals. He was at Rivals last year. Oh my gosh. Do you remember his name? I just went blank just now.
I cannot.
You remember talking to him over there by the
Yes,
quarterbacks?
yes.
That gummit, I went blank. Great guy, by the way. Mesquite Horn forever. And so that area generally is somewhat pro OU.
Well, they're in good with a couple other Horn guys in 2026 and Legend
that,
Bay.
yeah, that's what I mean. It's somewhat pro OU. That area is very, Legend Bay. Yeah. Yes, very much so. And so you look at Lamont Rogers and that visit, and he said, man, my dad loved this. My parents loved the Soul Mission, and they really got to see how I fit into this program. And he said that kind of, and I'm kind of paraphrasing here because obviously he didn't say it this way, but so that resonated really loudly with my parents. I do expect him to return. He made that very clear to me. He goes, "Oh, I'll be back this spring for sure, a couple times." So there's that. I would probably say Oklahoma leads. Now, Rogers also kind of strikes me as the guy, and I don't know about his family yet, because this is kind of the first time they've been around they've been around Oklahoma and just several other staffs this time around. It'd be the first time they've actually really made, a big effort to go to all these visits with him. Because generally it's the coaches driving him up for games and that type of stuff. But Lamont's also the type of guy that seems like he likes every visit. So you also have to take that in consideration. But Oklahoma he seems to have a little extra oomph in his quotes when he talks about Oklahoma than he does these other schools. So I think you have to take that in consideration as well. If I was a betting man right now and I was to pick OU's class, I might have Lamont Rogers in my predictions right now. So there's that. I would also have Michael Fasusi in the predictions and Andrew Babalola. So
really, you like OU's chances with Babalola that much?
I talked to him last night. Yes, I do.
Yeah. Okay.
Would you like me to dive into that?
Yeah, by all means, go ahead.
Yeah, why not?
I
haven't even updated this on OU Insider yet, so you guys are getting a little icing on the cake here when it comes to it.
Yeah, I personally haven't gotten a very strong OU vibe from him yet. So
he said he wasn't going to show up. He told me earlier in the week, I'm not going to make it, and then he just showed up. So that, again, I always go, actions speak louder than words.
Mm-hmm.
He made it. He said, I'm coming back for a spring practice in March, 100%. And he said, I will be back for an official visit, 100%. He goes, we're trying to set up the final dates right now. So that's why I feel like Oklahoma's in a good position. Like, he's already talking about the official visits in January with Oklahoma. To me, that means a lot. So, I guess I like Oklahoma's chances there. I don't necessarily think they lead, but I like Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma is up there with 2 or 3 other schools right now. So, I mean, I would imagine Missouri is in that equation.
Yes. Kansas is very
And
heavily involved.
Kansas, Nebraska, Kansas State. Like those are going to be the schools
Kansas and Missouri, like it kind of goes understated right now because they are just both of those programs are kind of just reaching the point to where they're once again considered nationally relevant because they weren't for many years. But Kansas and Missouri are poised to be more of a problem than they have been with some of those Midwest kids. Like that is real. Already getting that sense with several dudes, especially in that KC metro area where Oklahoma has been able to go into in recent years and grab guys that they want. Not everybody that they want, but certain guys they want. And obviously, Oregon has a strong presence there because of Dan Lanning's roots. Tennessee has a strong presence there, but it's getting to the point where Kansas and Missouri have more of a leg to stand on with some of those kids than they have in the recent past.
Yeah, and he's going to be visiting Tennessee next week. So Tennessee's also a player there. Not shocking. Tennessee is going to be a player for anybody that they want if they can afford it. So, but I will say that Tennessee doesn't recruit like Oklahoma does on the high school rink. So they're not. They like to save their money in their NIL for the transfer portal more than they do high school. So if it becomes usually a battle of that in high school, OU usually beats Tennessee head to head on that. Transfer portal, not so much. They like to go in on the transfer portal. So, is there anybody else you really want to talk about? Because we've got like 25 updates on OU Insider, and you guys like. I'm letting y'all know like that's where it's at. I'm about to throw some team notes up there later on in the next few days that are just gonna off-season stuff. Some dudes are running some fast times, bro. Fast times.
I will say this. I think in fairness to our subscribers, we'll keep a few of the updates behind the paywall over there at ouinsider.com. If you want all of the juice from Junior Day, again, that's the place to be. The one thing I will add, and I will continue to say it, is that everybody across the recruiting landscape seems to be under the impression that Christian Jones, the four-star linebacker from Omaha, is just going to end up a Cornhusker. I'm telling y'all, at least right now, that is not accurate. And I think Nebraska's got to win a lot of games this fall if they want to be able to secure his commitment. Because if they don't, I think he's going somewhere else. And if he were to commit before the fall, I think he would commit somewhere else. Oklahoma is a very big player there, as OU Insider subscribers are well aware.
Yeah. So as far as off-season team stuff goes, there are some guys running some good times. I'm going to have Peyton Bowen's time up there. I'm going to have Billy Bowman's. I'm going to talk about this will be. I'll be on OU Insider VIP. Just some updates on some of the players on offense and defense. You know, some of the shuttle times and all that we've been able to accrue. I'm still gathering some of that information, but I've got 5 or 6 guys right now that I think would be OU fans would be interested in. So again, that's OU Insider VIP. Let's talk basketball real quick. 1-point loss to Texas Tech on Saturday. They blew a 9-point lead. I don't know, man. Like when it comes stretch time, as good as Uzan is during the first 35 minutes of the game, he somehow sticks his head up his butt and airballs several shots. And that last shot he took, it didn't even barely graze rim. It was a floating off the backboard layup. And instead of hitting the glass, I bet he's shot that shot a million times in his life. And it goes over the other side of the goal. I'm sitting there going, what just happened?
That was not the look you wanted.
No.
And there was time, too. Like, there was time to get a good look. Did not need to rush that shot. But, yeah, man, again, the Big 12, if you're not on your P's and Q's every single time you hit the floor,
Every
it will eat you
second.
alive.
Yeah.
It will eat you alive. And Oklahoma's found that out the hard way on a couple occasions throughout this conference slate because, gosh, who was their first Big 12 loss to? Right before they lost to Kansas. I can't even recall. But there have been 2 instances now where they've gone 0 for the week. They lost midweek and they lost on the weekend in Big 12 play. And needless to say, that can't happen. That
I
can't
thought they
happen.
beat West Virginia before they played Kansas. They went to West
No, they
Virginia
beat West
1.
Virginia before West Virginia beat Kansas. That's what it was.
Yeah, they went to OU went to West Virginia 1, then they go to Kansas and lose.
Yeah.
Um,
I cannot recall who it was that beat them, but I know they lost right before Kansas. And then obviously they went up to Allen, hung in that game, but couldn't get it done. Now, I will say this, as long as you get to the tournament, you're going to be okay
yeah, all
because
they got to do is win 3 or 4 more games. They're going to go to the tournament.
there's so much talent in the Big 12. Like, and we've seen it time and again. We know it's true in college basketball more than any other sport, Brandon. You just get to the tournament. That's all you need to do because from there it's anybody's game. It's
Yeah,
all a matter of who gets hot.
well, that's what I was about to say. You got to hope that Oklahoma didn't peak right out of the gate, like the first 15 games of the year, right? Like it looked like they were one of the best teams in the country. They may have peaked really, really, really early, and that to me is the worst thing you can do. Like I think they would have been better off starting, 12-3 than starting off 14-1, honestly. And that's maybe I'm off on that. I don't know, but I think
I think it's good that they got as many wins in non-con as they did because
oh
they're going to
yeah,
need all
well,
of
I
them.
mean,
They're going to need all of them.
yeah, I mean, now and some of those wins at like Arkansas, it looks like it started to kind of right their ship a little bit.
Yeah.
Iowa is okay. Those are 2 good wins. I'm trying to think of all their really good wins non-con. They had several good wins non-con, but oh my gosh, who did Oklahoma beat that looks like they're just world beaters now? It's not a real big name either. I'm trying to think.
I do not have a clue.
Was it Providence? Are they doing well?
Is it
Is that
Providence?
I think it may be Providence.
I don't
That I'm
know.
thinking of. Providence and Georgetown have been going at it, and it's been interesting on Twitter. Seeing those press conferences. I don't know if you've seen that. That's been crazy. But I mean, they beat Providence. They have some decent wins. I'm not going to sit there and say they have great wins so far.
It was
But
TCU. That's who beat
it was
Oklahoma
TCU.
right before they went
Yeah,
to
that
Allen.
was yep. And they barely beat Oklahoma. They go in overtime. Was that right?
No, it wasn't overtime, but it was a tight game down the
It was
stretch.
a tight game. Yeah. Man, who's OU's next game? Is it Baylor? Is it at Baylor?
It is Kansas State.
At Kansas State, right?
They play at Bramlage tomorrow night.
Ugh. Well, it's not getting any easier, Sooner fans.
Hey, Porter did snap the drought in Bramlage, so you got that going for you. At least that losing skid up in Manhattan no longer exists.
So maybe you can go up there and get a dub. I don't know.
Got to get a road win, man. Got to. And
I'm
not at this point on the calendar. I guess I'm not. I shouldn't label any game a must win, but it feels like this is as close to a must win game as Oklahoma has had all year because you got to reverse the trend. You got to get your moxie back after those 2 straight losses. And on the road against Jerome Tang's team, it's a tough place to do it, but what kind of confidence is that going to give Oklahoma if they can go and get it done in Manhattan?
Yeah. If I'm OU, and I'm trying to look at their schedule right now. They go to Kansas State, to UCF, And I think that if they go 1-for-2 there, I think that's okay because you got BYU at home. You got to beat BYU at home. You got to beat Oklahoma State at home, which I think they can go 2-0 there. And that would put them at 18 wins, right? You're already at 18 wins. You're probably going to lose at Baylor. If you can beat Kansas at home and go to K-State and win, you're at 20 wins. You're probably not going to beat Iowa State at Iowa or in Ames. And then if you can somehow win 2 of the 3 of Houston, Cincinnati, Texas, I think you're looking at a 3, 4, 5 seed probably because it's just those are some big wins because it's the Big 12 and most of those teams are ranked that I just named. You get 22 wins and you're 22-7, 22-8. I think that's a good season for Oklahoma, particularly because I think one thing we need to remember is this team was picked second to last in the Big 12.
Mm-hmm.
They far superseded that already. They're going to go to the tournament as long as they win 3, 4 more games. They get to 18 wins. The chances of you not making the tournament with how tough the Big 12 is, slim to none. Particularly how well they did in non-con. I think the fact that they had a really tough non-con is going to help Oklahoma substantially as far as getting into the tournament. Now, you would rather be 3, 4, 5 seed than you would 8, 9, 10, 11. Right? Like,
I legitimately don't think it matters.
Really?
Truly do not. Just because, like, show me the team in college basketball that's invincible this year. And that's kind of, like Oklahoma got a tough draw back in 2022, for instance, because their second round draw, I think it was Ole Miss or somebody in the first. I can't even recall, but whoever they played in the first round, should they win that game, which obviously they did, they were getting a matchup with the overall number 1 seed Gonzaga in the next round. And Gonzaga was kind of a juggernaut that year. And so certain years, you're just hoping to avoid that Grim Reaper type of matchup. I'm not really convinced that matchup's going to exist in this year's tournament. And so, again, that's why I think having been battle tested in the Big 12, I really don't believe it matters. As long as you get to the tournament, I don't believe it matters where you were seated. I think anybody and everybody in the Big 12 is going to be deep enough and weathered enough to go make a run. That includes Oklahoma.
That's fair. Fair enough. All right. I think that'll do it for this version of the OU Insider Under the Visor Sooners podcast. If you're not a subscriber to this YouTube channel, subscribe. We have content daily on here. If you like OU, if you like college sports, if you like recruiting, whether it's football, basketball, baseball, softball, wrestling, whatever, we got it for you right here. OU Insider YouTube channel. If you really like the inside, the scoop, whether it's team, whether it's recruiting, whether it's transfer portal, and you want that back insider information that you're not going to get anywhere else, OU Insider VIP is where it's at. Parker and I answer questions daily. We talk to you daily. That is about it's filled with information. If you want to be the smart guy that wants to know everything at the water cooler when it comes to OU athletics and the recruiting, and be the guy that knows all the inside, the back channel stuff, OU Insider VIP is where it's at. $9.99 a month and or $99.95 gets you a whole year. We'll get you all the way through the first SEC season, all the official visits, spring football, what have you, the SEC media days, fall camp, all of that will have you covered if you get a whole year of OU Insider VIP. All right. For Parker Thune, my name is Brandon Drum. You guys have a blessed day.